time for the meet and greet. Meet and greet. It's time for the meet and greet.
Hello everyone, welcome to Asavari's Meeting Show 12. So Asavari's Meeting Show is a socio-political platform which is recorded on Zoom, edited and uploaded on YouTube. We have successfully done 11 episodes. So today's guest is Freshta Taeb. She is the Afghan TV host, works at Virginia Tech School of Public and International Affairs and Cornerstone Marriage and Family Intervention. She is a Dari language specialist, meaning a certified Dari translator and interpreter. So if you want to know more about her, you need to go to her website, which is freshtataeb.com. So I would request Freshta to kindly introduce herself to our beautiful audience.
Thank you so much, Gargi. I'm so happy and honored to be on your show today. I think you've done a good introduction of what it is that I do. The main focus currently is that I'm a senior refugee interventionist, which means that I am dealing with the Afghan guests on a very intimate level, dealing with issues of PTSD, mental health disorders, marital discourse, and domestic violence.
Okay, so today we have three great topics of discussion. The first one is military base. So today is Veterans Day, and first of all, a very happy Veterans Day for the service, and we have a great respect for US Army. So talking about the military base of America in Afghanistan, so it is the longest war, which is 20 years. 700K plus soldiers were deployed. Unfortunately, it wasn't a success. Our current president, Mr. Biden, is heavily criticized by his opponents and the media on his hasty decision. Taliban seized the abundant American army bases, found many unopened boxes, discovered arms and weapons which the NATO forces have left behind. Now, as we all know, the Talibans are pro-Sharia. In fact, they want to impose stricter Sharia laws. And that's what is Afghanistan's main concern right now. So Freshta, if you can kindly throw some more light on this issue.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I want to make the clarification that Sharia is Islamic law, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The issue with the Taliban is that this is an extremist movement that is using theological doctrine to fulfill and further a political agenda that is not related to the religion, that is not related, more so related to using certain ideologies to fulfill missions such as preventing women from having rights that they are Islamically and according to Sharia allowed to have. So I just wanted to make that clarification that pro-Sharia doesn't necessarily mean that this means that this is a negative thing. It means that.
But they want to impose the stricter Sharia laws, the stricter. So if you can kindly focus on that word stricter, that how women have been suffering, how people of Afghanistan have been suffering from all these rules, regulations imposed on them.
Right. So there's nothing in Sharia that says that women are not to be educated and not to work. Our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his wife was one of the biggest businesswomen of her time in the Medina period. So this is in the Mecca period, rather. So this is not something that is Islamic necessarily, but very extremist ideologies that are being used to stop women from going to school, to stop women from obtaining the rights that they are entitled to.
Exactly. So I've heard that, they are forced to stay at home and they are not encouraged to go to the businesses or offices, and even the beauty parlors, they're shut. So what do you want to say on this?
Yeah, one of the most provocative images, I think, after the collapse of Afghanistan was that that image stays with me, that people were painting over the murals at the barbershops, painting over women's images. And this obviously is something that is very difficult to deal with, being that we had 20 years of gains. Women were back in the workforce, women were back in journalism, in parliament positions, in education. So to have all of that regress again has been a very difficult journey. And that is correct. Children, girls that are over the age of 12 are no longer allowed to go to school. Women are not allowed to leave their homes without male chaperones. This is very difficult. A lot of these shops, women-owned businesses, have been closed.
So the next topic of discussion is resettlement and challenges. So Freshta, before I talk about it, I want you to tell our viewers that how you have been doing resettlement and challenges.
Sure. So to go back to the original point of military bases, so essentially what's transpired is after the collapse of the country on August 15th of 2021, the United States started an evacuation process. And in that evacuation process, Afghans have been sent to 8 military bases in the United States, along with other countries that were mentioned earlier that are being used as what we call safe havens and lily pads. What's happening from there on is they are being processed at the military bases it starts first with immigration processing, so they're given a status. After they're finished with doing the processing and of their immigration status, which can either be a special immigrant visa, it could be a P2 visa, it could be humanitarian parole. We'd have to have a whole show just to discuss the differences. But really what happens is the next step is the medical screening, the health screening. Each individual will have to partake in receiving vaccinations, making sure that they don't have COVID. If they do, they're quarantined. And then after that, basically have to catch up on all the immunizations that they're lacking in. After that, they get set up through resettlement agencies in the United States to be resettled to their permanent homes. So their temporary homes are right now in those 8 military bases. I happen to have the honor of volunteering at one of them locally. And my job really is to fulfill and to bridge the gaps, the cultural competency gaps that we're seeing with the departure strategy. There are many people that are on these bases that are getting frustrated and want to leave. So they're doing what's called independent departures. And in these independent departures, there's a lot of challenges with resettlement. There are several resettlement agencies in the country, but the biggest challenge right now, quite frankly, is housing. We have a housing crisis. We have, over 63,000 people, and housing has already been an issue in the United States. But now each camp is holding at least 13,000 people, approximately per base, give or take, less or more. And finding homes for these people, resettling them in communities that are dignified and that have support systems has been very challenging.
So if you don't mind, who is financing this and where are you getting help from? Is somebody sponsoring it or helping you financially, doing any fundraiser?
Right. So it really depends on what avenue you're looking at. So if we're looking at the resettlement agencies, they do have funding. Very recently, Congress passed another bill giving an extra $6.5 billion to resettlement agencies. So I can give you an example. The resettlement agency will receive these grants or these funds, and they will funnel into the agency. The agency is responsible for housing, about 90 days of rent, welcome money, so that they're able to purchase things that they need for their homes. And then, of course, after that, they will use those funds to obtain the household items and their basic necessities in the beginning. There are not-for-profit organizations that are supplementing a lot of these efforts. 501c3 organizations that have been helping locally in the state. This is a state-run. Once federal is done processing, it falls to the state. So the state funding is very important to look at. We are advocating for different states to pass and different counties to pass resolutions to welcome refugees, which is the importance. I know our last point, we'll be talking about policy and advocacy later, but really very, very important to know that there are several fundraising efforts happening with partners. We have these partners that are community organizations trying to assist, whether it's housing, whether it's clothing, whether it's donations, which has been a huge thing. Donation drives have been very essential, both on the base and off the base. As you said earlier, people are coming with 1 or 2 pairs of clothing and just plastic bags, just coming over, just so they'll be needing all of these things.
Right. It's really heartbreaking to see how people are leaving Afghanistan and their dear ones. They may not see their families again. People living with their entire life packed in a few suitcases and backpacks. Now, countries we know that USA, UK, Germany, and many others, they have been giving shelters to these refugees. And some military bases and convention centers have also become the refugee camps. So my question would be, I mean, you have already said that you guys are trying very hard by raising funds and to give them, to provide hot meals and also medicine and especially the COVID. So housing is an issue. So where are these people right now staying in USA, if we talk about USA or New York?
Yeah, sure. So the military bases are located in different areas. We have military bases in New Jersey. We have Fort Dix there. We have Fort Pickett, that's in Virginia. We have Quantico, Holloman, there, Fort Bliss, Texas, right? So we have Fort McCoy in Wisconsin. So the bases are spread throughout the United States of America. They are spread throughout the nation. And basically they're being housed there. Some of the, most of the barracks have been emptied out and people are either staying in rooms depending on when they arrived. They have also been building, the DoD has an incredible engineering team who is building tents, sometimes overnight. I'll show up on Monday. By the time Thursday rolls around, there's been huge infrastructures that have been built in with both, whether it's housing and everything is very.
So how big are the rooms?
Not very big. You can imagine,
Almost, right?
They're small rooms. It's a very difficult operation. It's hard to wrap your head fully around having 10 to 13,000 people in one place. Military base is not designed for people to be living there or to be turned into a refugee camp. And I will say that the DoD, our brothers and sisters uniformed, have been such amazing support. They have been doing such acts of mercy and kindness that I can take a whole show just talking about their incredible efforts to make these guests feel comfortable.
So how many people are there in one room?
It really depends on the family. So the operations are broken up into 3. Single females are separate from single males in their housing, and then families are together. So if there is a husband, wife, and children, they can also be with the single female.
So just one family in one room or more than one families in one room?
Some of them have 2 rooms. It really depends on the size and what they're able to accommodate. Those are rooms. Now, other people staying in tents, so the tents are designed a little bit differently, and every base's layout is different. Some of the bases are smaller. Some of them are big. The one that I'm working at is quite large because it's a joint base. It's 2 bases. Air Force bases that have shared space, 2 spaces joined into one. So it's fairly large.
So are they furnished to some extent? I mean, do they have beds and all that?
Yes, yes, of course, there's beds and
They're not
cots.
sleeping on the floor.
No, absolutely not. Yes, they are furnished. They do have heating capacities. We've even built their hospital medical tents. There are even mosques for people to pray in. We have created masajid there, which is wonderful due to the community's help and due to the DoD helping to build these infrastructures. They are what we've been doing on our end is morale boosting events. We just recently had a concert where we asked celebrities from the Afghan community to come, very big name celebrities come and perform. We've had a kebab night where we fed thousands of our Afghan guests fresh kebab off the skewers. It was an incredible effort from the community because they have been eating this non-Afghan food for quite some time. And that can also, the colonel on the base wanted the smell and the vibe of feeling like you're back home. And we were, with the help of great people, able to accomplish that.
So roughly, approximately, what, is the duration that you can guess or speculate that it will take for this settlement?
Well, to be honest with you, there is no concrete answer to that. You can ask any base and you can ask any official. There's no clear-cut answer to how long. What we can say is we are encouraging, and I'm saying this on air so that if anybody hears it, they can pass it along. We are highly encouraging people to stay in the bases until they are resettled. Doing an independent departure is very challenging because it throws off the entire system. If you stay on the base, you're going to be processed for work authorization. Even as a parolee, you are still entitled to receive work authorization. And that will be your ticket to leaving the base and being able to work hard for your family. Also, housing. Important to wait on the base until your house is ready. If you do an independent departure, we're working backwards. You can still go to your nearest resettlement agency and ask for the services, but they will be delayed. You'll probably end up staying at a hotel or an Airbnb until things are processed. Better to stay at the base, get all of it out of the way, have all your paperwork, all your documents, your home ready to go, and then just start your life fresh.
So how is the Afghan community responding? Are they hosting? If you can kindly.
Absolutely. So I have to say, this is probably the first time in my entire life that I have seen the Afghan community come out the way that they have, unified, whether it's come to donation drives, whether it's come to hosting families, whether it's coming to mentoring families, which is actually a really huge thing. I know that when my parents came in the late 70s, there was no mentorship. There was no people before. There was nobody to sit down and say, hey, this is how it works in this country. But since we have an established community now, we have established professionals, we have established mentors, we're able to provide this service. This hopefully will be a different kind of resettlement and assimilation than from our parents' time.
I have another question to ask you, if you don't mind. The Afghan people, those who have arrived to USA and several other countries, they have been going through a lot of stress. So what about the counseling? Are you guys doing any kind of counseling to motivate them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that I started to do once I got on the base was I was getting a lot of frantic phone calls of women that were suffering greatly with mental health issues. And in the beginning, I was just jumping in as a volunteer and trying to go there, talk to people, reassure them, counsel. But now I'm happy to announce that the USCRI team has actually brought together a team of Afghan American mental health professionals. And each base now will have a team, and that team will be spearheaded by the USCRI. And they have community health workers that are walking around the base and doing needs assessments. And then those needs assessments are then being turned into referrals. They got referred to the program manager there. and the program manager then assigns them to the appropriate mental health provider. So happy to announce that we do have that
Right.
service.
Because I can imagine that, leaving a country, leaving the dear ones, leaving the property, leaving everything. I mean, the sweet memories of Afghanistan is a very, very difficult job. And when they are in a completely different country, completely different environment, ambience, people. So sometimes people, they go through such a severe phase of depression, tension, pressure, frustration that they may become suicidal. So mental health issues, counseling, these are very important. So if you can tell our viewers a little bit more on this issue.
Correct. So people from Afghanistan are suffering from two things. Not everybody, but most. PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. It is a normal reaction to an abnormal event. It is abnormal to be at war. It is abnormal to witness the atrocities of war. So that stays with you and that lingers, and there are triggers that are associated with that. And the second thing is the shock of displacement or culture shock. Mm-hmm. So you leave a very, very different region. Asia is very, very different than the West. You leave the East to come to the West, and then you go from dealing with the PTSD of the war to culture shock, coming to a country that does not resemble your own. The people do not speak the language. The people do not eat the cuisine. And there is what we call the refugee curve. It takes, on average, 1 to 3 years, usually 3 to 5, with war-torn countries, to be able to assimilate to the country and actually start to feel like they're at home.
Mm-hmm. And especially US, landing in such a country which has given Afghanistan a tremendous shock. So all these drone attacks, all these blasts, the unnecessary war. So landing in such a country, which has snatched their everything. Their land, their democracy, their near and dear ones, their property, their culture, their heritage. So how do you see, when you talk to those Afghans who have landed recently, so how do they communicate? How do they express their feelings to you?
Well, I think most people are very grateful for the opportunity. For those people who are SIVs or P2s, and they've actually worked with the United States, this is, a way of saying, you've worked with us, and now we're going to give you an opportunity to a better life. I think there's that group of people. But then there are also people who were really struggling in Afghanistan and having financial difficulties. And, as of now, we're at the top of the list for, we're probably the biggest humanitarian crisis as far as food goes. Mm-hmm. There is a starvation crisis right now, especially that assets have been frozen and this regime has taken over. It's become more and more difficult. So I think putting the socio-political to one side and just bringing the humanitarian cause, I think that at the end of the day, regardless of what has happened in the past 20 plus years, there is still that feeling of resilience. There's still that hope. And the beauty of the Afghan people is that despite what they've gone through and despite what type of trauma that I have sat down and discussed with them at length, they're still very hopeful that they will still have a better future, a brighter future, and an opportunity to live at peace.
Right. USA is definitely the land of opportunity, and our ancestors, they came with a lot of hope. And that's how the country is made. It is a country made by the foreigners. People from Europe, they migrated and they made this country. So it is so cosmopolitan. Now, regarding the advocacy and the policy, it came in the news that some families are selling their children, because they want their children to have a better life, selling their children to the foreigners, to the foreign countries. I mean, if I cannot go out of Afghanistan, at least I would like my son or my daughter to have a better life and not suffer from being, under the Taliban's. So I personally feel that the UN and the international community should seriously react on the fundamental issues, the women's liberty, security, and financial improvement of Afghanistan. So what would be your views?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a board member of the Afghan American Foundation. You guys can look at our website, www.afghanamericans.org. We have done a great deal of advocacy work as far as, we have spoken to different political figures, congressmen, assemblymen, Department of State, Department of Homeland Security. We have very high profile meetings to discuss these different avenues of getting us different types of funding and assistance when it comes to assisting our new Afghan arrival guests, but also maintaining that bilateral relationship with Afghanistan and assisting in trying to sustain peace in that country and in that region. So it is one of our mission statements and one of our goals, and we work very hard toward that. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in some of the letters that we have written are on our website. We encourage you to read them. We encourage you to spread them. And it's incredibly important. I can't emphasize enough. A lot of people reach out to me and say, hey, what can I do? What you can do is you can call your local.
Reaching out to people, networking, these are very important. Now, I just want to ask you a question that since you said that you had been hosting and participating in all these meetings, discussion, so has it taken you to the next level, or is it just a discussion only?
No, I think that we've definitely seen a lot of change. We've asked for a seat at the table, not to just be, and I think one of the biggest problems that we've been having over the years, over 20 years when it comes to Afghanistan, has been that people have been speaking for us. We've always had Afghanistan SME subject matter experts that are not Afghan, right? And I find that very problematic. And so does our community. So I think that we are working toward getting a seat at the table and not just being on the menu, right? So I think we have seen several changes happen, such as parolees. One of the things we were pushing for was for parolees to have funding and to actually have the same type of benefits that SIVs, because the majority of people that are coming over fall under that category. We've been successful in attaining that. We've been successful at a state level to get our governor here in New Jersey to recognize and create a task force for the refugees and Afghan guests that have arrived. We've built a coalition here of not-for-profit, and we have weekly meetings, and we're working very hard. We have one of Passaic County pass a resolution welcoming our refugees on a local level. So advocacy and policy change really has to happen a local level, a state level, a federal level. It's multifaceted and multi-layered. Right. And it's important to make sure that you execute on every level.
Right. I completely agree with you. So my final question to you would be that how are your neighbors reacting, supporting? So how are your neighbors reacting? How are they being supportive to you?
So, I mean, that's a really good question. I don't have as much information, unfortunately. My focus has been primarily on three things. One, I'm still, up until right before I got on this interview, trying to get people out of Afghanistan. Evacuation is still a number one at the top. There's no number one, but if there had to be, that's pretty much still at the top of the line for me, because there are still people who are completely eligible. There's women's rights activists that are still in our country that need to get out before they are either held for ransom or taken. We also have, my other priority is here with our Afghan guests to get them resettled in the most dignified and most respected manner possible. In August, I spoke at a protest and I promised my people and I promised my community that even down to donations, we would not accept anything that was used only brand new with tags, because Afghan people are humans. They are to be respected, they are to be valued, and especially that they've gone through so much trauma, they should be getting even better treatment due to the trauma. They're very fragile and vulnerable and they need us. So that's another priority. And of course, lastly, but certainly not least, is policy change. So what's going on and what my neighbors are doing currently, if they're allowing us to have safe havens and they're allowing us to have some of these more discreet and covert evacuations that are happening through some of our neighbors. They've been supportive. Some of our neighbors have not been supportive. Some of our neighbors are creating more problems, and we can leave it at that.
So some people, from Afghanistan, they're migrating to Pakistan because some part of Pakistan, especially the western part of Pakistan, they share common culture with Afghanistan. So how do you see this? I mean, is it a great and a brave move of Pakistan, or should they not encourage and the Afghans should stay in Afghanistan because this is their land? And if everybody moves out, then the Taliban's, they can be more aggressive in their approach and execution.
Right. So it's really difficult to come unless you're in the shoes of human beings. It's very difficult for me to say that if an individual is living on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan and they decide to leave and go through the border and go, I can't speak for their situation. I don't know how volatile the situation is, how harmful it is. I myself, I have daughters. I don't know what I would do in this situation to protect. I know that I would do whatever I needed to do to protect my children and to protect their safety. To me, will always be the number one priority that I have in my life. So I cannot speak to other people who leave the country, whether it's to Pakistan, whether it's to India, whether it's to Iran, whether it's to Tajikistan, whether these are the places that people are fleeing to, and they're leaving for whatever reason. This is unfortunately the plight of war. The plight of our people has always been displacement. When people are at war and people are desperate times, call for desperate measures, nobody wants to leave their home unless they're forced.
So I would like to also know that Taliban's 20 years ago and 20 years later, do you think that there is any change? Because things change. And I have seen, I'm not saying that I'm not giving them any certificate, but I have seen their interviews. They speak good English and they are kind of point-wise. They are kind of expressing their logical views. So do you think that education among the Talibans who have learned from I think there had been an US university. So do you think that education may have made any difference? They cannot completely change a person or a personality or a group of people but any change? Do you see any hope, any light that you see the Taliban's 20 years before and 20 years later?
So I've been asked this question before in different interviews, and my answer doesn't really change. I think that over a course of 20 years, trends change, the way people look change, but the mind doesn't change. The ideology doesn't change. I have never been an advocate for the Taliban or their ideology, nor will I ever be. I do not trust the Taliban. I do not acknowledge or recognize them as a regime in Afghanistan. I don't even recognize them as a government. I do believe that they are a group of extremists who have been using my religion. And I've said this before, not in the name of my religion, not in the name of my people. Taliban actually are not even from Afghanistan. They have been trained in other countries and their ideology has come to us. I believe that Afghanistan has been hijacked by many different extremist ideologies from the Arab countries, from Pakistan. These ideologies and these views are not Afghan centered, Afghan focused. They did not come from our country. Our country is the land of Rumi. Our country is the land of mysticism. Our country is the land of art and culture and hundreds and hundreds of years of beautiful poetry. I know in the Asian world, I'm sure you're well aware that our poetry, our songs, our cuisine is very, very famous and very
I know,
renowned.
I'm so excited about the cuisine because I'm myself a foodie. And Afghanistan has a beautiful history. It has a beautiful landscape. And see, there had been a lot of dark cloud, but the silver lining of the dark cloud is that people who didn't even have any idea of what Afghanistan is, where Afghanistan is located, now the entire world, they know about your country. So I hope that at some point, the old and rich cultural heritage of Afghanistan is revived, recovered, and restored. And the world gets an opportunity to go there so that, they know what actual Afghanistan is, not just a land full of dust. So it's not a war zone. It wasn't a war zone, but it has been hijacked, as you said. And it's really a big tragedy. It's very sad to see that. And I'm very optimistic that there will be a day which may come and you will be able to see good days.
Absolutely. No, I really appreciate that. And the last thing that I will say is that I encourage everybody who's watching right now to please do not forget about Afghanistan. Do not forget about the people of Afghanistan who are currently starving. There's a humanitarian crisis going on. Do not forget about the neighbors that you will now have in your communities. There will be thousands of Afghans here. Please reach out to the Afghan Americans that are dealing with all of this trauma. They might need you to check up on them. They might need you to stop by, have a cup of tea with them. It is a very, very difficult time for us. We are watching our country be once again taken over by these people. And we are also trying to help. We are in many different positions, difficult positions. Most of us that I know have left our jobs. We've taken leaves of absence to be able to deal with this crisis. So please do not forget about us.
Thank you so much, Freshta. It is indeed my great pleasure to have you in my show. And I will ask you again, I will invite you again to appear and talk about your country and about the resettlement, about the advocacy, and about the different crucial issues that, many people, including myself, we are unaware of the situation. So we will try our very best to see that how we can help your community. And after all, it's we are all human, and we share the original culture among ourselves. So it's indeed our duty and responsibility to shake hands with you, to hold your hands tightly and not let it go, and to be with you.
Thank you so much, Gargi.
Inshallah.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts, and thank you for giving us a voice.
Sure, absolutely. No voice should be unheard. Thank you. Thank you once again. Thank you.